Hey everyone, Scott Sambucci here. Today we're going to be talking about setting up pilot programs. So this falls pretty squarely in the how. So how do your customers buy your product? So the challenge that we have oftentimes when selling a new product or a new service as a startup is trying to get that customer or those target customers that we're going after to really get a sense for what's it going to look like when they're using our product in their company. And so one of the ways that we can overcome that is by using what I call pilot programs. So why is that important? Why do we want to use pilot programs as a start? So the first thing it allows you to do is vet your sales opportunities. And so what I mean by that is by introducing a pilot program to a potential sales opportunity, it will allow you to test whether or not that person you're dealing with is a decision maker. Do they have the budget and the authority, even if it's a small amount of money, to go ahead and get something paid to you in exchange for the product that would be used as part of the pilot program? It also allows you to identify outside of the exchange of money, it's the exchange of time. So is that sales opportunity interested in really understanding how your product is going to work? Or are they just being nice and going through the steps of the sales process and not telling you no? So by introducing the concept of a pilot program as a part of your sales process, it will enable you to vet whether or not you're dealing with somebody who's really serious about buying your product and using it to solve their problems and somebody who's just being nice. The next step in the next reason this is important with pilot programs is it allows you to build trust. So by starting really, really small and coming through for that early customer, by showing them early success, by showing them not just the results they're going to get as a result of using your product, also though giving you a chance, the pilot programs give you a chance to show your customers that you know what you're doing, that you're committed to their success, that when they have a question, you're able to answer it. When they have a customer service issue, that you're able to resolve it, that the product does all the things that you say it's going to do within the confines of that pilot project. So by actually getting to work, even in a really, really smally scoped project, it allows you to build that trust with the customer. So they get to work with you not as a salesperson, but as a true partner, because you're going to be in there within the walls of that company solving the problems that they have with your product. The third reason that pilot programs are important is that they will help you and help your customer reduce risk. So we as startups, we inherently come with the baggage of risk. So large companies, small companies, any company out there that's going to be buying your product or service, they're viewing you as risky. So anything outside of status quo is risky. People don't like change. People are very averse to risk. They're very averse to change. So couple that natural aversion that people have to any change whatsoever with the fact that you're a startup, that you're a small company, that you're a growing company. Now you've compounded the amount of risk that is associated with implementing your solution. And so by introducing a pilot program and very quickly showing that you can build trust, it allows you and the customer to mutually reduce the risk that comes with implementing your solution within their company. So the fourth reason this is important is the pilot programs allows you to prove product problem success, meaning that the customer obviously has a problem, which is why they're talking with you in the first place. And once you get into that company and your product starts to work for them, you're going to have the proof that you need to show the customer that, hey, it's not just me in the sales process telling you that I can solve your problems. I'm now able to prove to you that I can solve your problems. And we're going to do that through this pilot program. And fifth, most importantly, in a lot of ways, when it comes to growing the revenue of your company, the pilot programs allow you to get paid. So pilot programs by definition are paid programs. We're not talking about free trials. We're not talking about beta testing. Pilot programs are paid. So by getting paid, it allows you to prove your business model exists, that the companies out there are willing to give you money in exchange for your product. The money is the way that we show that value has been created here. And so by getting paid, of course, it's useful to have that cash in the door. More importantly, it allows you to go to your investors, current and future, and say, hey, we have customers, real customers, people that are paying us money. And so by introducing these pilot programs, it allows you to get paid even if the amount that you're getting paid is much, much smaller than you eventually plan to get paid down the road. It still breaks the ice. It still breaks through that payment barrier. and get you away from doing free trials and beta testing to having actual customers paying you actual money. Okay, so those are all the reasons that we want to use pilot projects. And so let's talk more materially about how you can do this, what you can do to get these up and running. So here are 5 things that you need to know about pilot programs. The first is to keep it small. Keep those pilot programs really, really, really small. So if you're a startup, chances are that your product is not fully complete. You haven't completed the entire product roadmap or the full vision. And so in a lot of ways, you have that as an advantage to you when it comes to introducing these pilot programs to your potential customers. And by keeping it small, what we're talking about is just focusing certain product features and functionalities to the target customer. So they would only be using perhaps part of your product. Maybe other parts are still in development or they're still in beta mode, and you want to sort of avoid using those types of features and functionalities as part of the pilot. It also allows you to test your minimally viable product. So if you're at the stage of product development that maybe your early product is just an MVP, by introducing this idea of a pilot project, it allows you to keep the cost benefit really, really clear and really, really isolated to just a few features or even one feature, one functionality. And so that's one part of keeping it small. It's just the scope of work that's being done or the amount of the product that might be used within the target company. So that's the first, keep it small. The second, keep it small, is also in terms of the number of users or the total impact on the company's organization. And so as an example, if you're selling a large software package over time that you think could be used by thousands of people in a large company, then by keeping it small, what we're saying is find a really small team. Maybe it's a team of 5 people, maybe it's a team of 10 people, that with your software product, you can prove that early success and gives you access to all 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 users, so you can get that quick product feedback, that you can make sure that the customer service you're providing is necessary, that you're able to resolve any bugs that might come up with the product, that you're able to identify and really create those relationships that you're going to need to build the trust that will allow you to expand down the road. So that's the first principle with pilot programs, is to keep it small, keep it focused in terms of the product scope, the features and functionalities that you're rolling out, and also the size of the team that you might be impacting. So first rule, keep it small. So the second thing you need to know around pilot programs is that you want to work under the budget ceiling. So what we mean by that is whatever the lowest possible amount of money that you could accept in exchange for the value that is being created as part of this pilot program is what you want to do. So a lot of times when you're working with pilot programs, when you're keeping it small and you're working with small teams or local managers, oftentimes those local managers, whether it's a VP, like a sales VP or marketing VP, a product VP, engineering VP, whoever it is in kind of that middle layer of management within the companies that you're selling to, what you want to do is keep it under a budget ceiling that allows those managers to make the decision locally. So I remember as a sales manager in a number of different companies that I worked in, and most recently at a company called Blend where I worked, the CFO of our company allowed me to make decisions on certain products on my own. I didn't have to ask permission for purchases on things like our CRM. And so the CRM was roughly a $20,000, $25,000 purchase for us as a company. And he trusted me. He said, look, as long as you feel like this product is going to do what we need it to do as an organization, then I trust you to make that decision. I had that budget authority that I could go ahead and do that. Now, I still wanted to go and consult with him and make sure that it was okay if we spent X amount of dollars on our CRM. But to keep that decision local, I was very, very easily allowed to set up trials or set up pilots, and I was allowed to test different products. And in fact, I would just put those early tests, those early trials on my credit card, my corporate credit card. So these are, $1,000, $5,000 decisions that I could just slap down a credit card and pay for that out of my own budget, in a sense. I didn't have to go get an invoice sent to me, and I didn't have to get the CFO and the accounting team to go ahead and write a big check, right? So I was able to keep that decision locally. So what you want to do is find that situation, whatever the target customer is, the target person within your organization or the target teams, you want to work with those people and find out like what is kind of the budget ceiling that you have to work with. Whether that is, quarter to quarter, you have a certain amount of discretionary dollars that you can allocate to investigating new technology or solving certain problems that you have. Or maybe it's that, any decision that's under $10,000 may be decisions that you'll be able to make without having to go too far up the ladder. whatever that is, you want to work with individual customers to identify what that budget ceiling is, and just make sure that the amount of that pilot program that you're rolling out is in fact underneath that budget ceiling, so that you're not creating too complex of a decision process within those target companies. The point of doing the pilot in the first place is to keep it small, to build the trust, to prove the success, so that later on down the road you can move up the corporate ladder and ask for a lot more money down the road. So don't think about these pilot programs as a way to try to, get rich or really build a ton of revenue. The idea is that you want to get just enough revenue so that it is proving some exchange of value, that local manager has to go through a decision process and has to think to themselves like, hey, I am going to be paying money. So this is the real deal. This is not just some beta test or free trial that I can walk away from at any time. They're going to be on the hook internally because they've made this purchasing decision. So figure out what that budget ceiling is and then work underneath it. So the third piece about pilot projects that you want to remember to do is always establish metrics. So one of the places you can get really caught is in a pilot project is you could roll out a program that's really small, really focused. You're getting paid a little bit of money. So all those things are really great. However, if at the end of that pilot project, say it's a 6-week project, an 8-week project, if you haven't set the rules to the game for that pilot project at the very beginning, then how are you going to be able to go back and say, hey, we were successful? See what I'm saying here? So what you want to do in the very beginning of that pilot program is figure out with the product champion or the executive that you're working with or the team, you want to sit down before you roll out the program as you're planning it out. You want to sit and figure out what those metrics are. So whatever the metrics are should be metrics that you know you can achieve and are going to be beneficial for the company that you're working with. So whatever your software or whatever your product does, you want to sit down and figure out what those metrics are. So whether that is a way to track more revenue that you're helping to create for your target customer, or some decrease in cost, some way of proving efficiency gains as a result of using your product, or some way of reducing risk. Whatever those metrics are, you want to be able to have a really, really clear view of what those metrics are. Maybe it's 2 or 3 key metrics that both sides agree, yes, these are the most important metrics for us to measure going through this pilot program. And then at the end of the pilot program, you can point to those metrics. And of course, along the way, you want to be reminding your customer every week or every couple of weeks, like, hey, remember we set up these 3 metrics? Well, look, week 1, we're already hitting them. Week 2, we're improving upon them. Week 3, we're staying steady, whatever that is, so that at the end of that pilot program, you have a really, really clear way of saying, yes, remember we said these were the 2 metrics that we were measuring upon. And in fact, we blew them out of the water. Therefore, we have proven success, and we should be expanding the engagement beyond this pilot program. So it's super important to establish those metrics early on so that you know and the customer knows exactly how the success is going to be measured. And you can also treat those metrics as a trial close to a larger engagement, because you can say, hey, we're going to set up these 2 metrics, 2 or 3 metrics as part of the pilot program. I'm totally in agreement with you. I'm sure that we're going to be able to hit those metrics and then some. And customer, when we hit those metrics, then what is the path to then convert to a larger engagement? So once we prove success with these early metrics with your 10-person team, how do we ensure that at the end of that pilot program that we're able to roll out to 50 more people or 100 more people over the next 3 months? So you want to use that as a trial close, because if that person you're dealing with says, well, even if we hit those metrics, I'm not really sure how we would go ahead and roll out to the rest of the company. Or, well, then, after that, we'd have to go to the board and we'd have to do all these presentations. Now you've got a lack of clarity as to what the next steps are. So that gives you an opportunity to address the opaqueness that would come with that kind of conversation and say, okay, well, look, before we start the pilot program, we're both going to be spending a lot of time making sure that we're successful. You're going to be spending a little bit of money. Let's be really clear. Like, if we hit these 3 metrics, then who would need to be involved? Who else should we be at least involving in looking at us or watching this pilot program? So maybe there's another executive VP, a couple rings higher in the corporate ladder that, we don't need that person's permission to get up and running with this pilot program because we're keeping it small. The budget expense is not really high. However, if and when we're successful with these metrics, we do want to go up and ask for more money. So maybe we should at least inform that executive VP before we get started, let them know what we're planning to test, and that way that person will be familiar with who we are, and maybe they can give us some other ways that we can think about measuring. So it's a way for you to kind of elbow your way around through the organization and be sure that you're not wasting time with yes, you want to stay local, but you want to make sure you're not wasting time with people who are only local and are not able to give you access to other parts of the organization that will allow you to expand after the pilot is successful. Okay, so that's all the reasons that establishing metrics are so critical. So the fourth idea around pilot programs and pilot projects is you want to think consulting. And so what I mean by that is you need to be willing to get your hands dirty. There's going to be a lot of, if you're keeping it small and your product is an MVP, or even if it's better than an MVP, chances are your product is not going to do everything you need it to do, or the transition from, say, the users that are using your product, the transition from using the product they're using, say, 3 minutes before your product and 3 minutes after your product might be a little sloppy. Or maybe there's some data exchange that needs to take place, that in order for your users of your pilot program, the people that are in your pilot program using your product, maybe in order to make sure that they're successful, you're going to have to do some manual data loads every night. Maybe you're going to have to take data from one database within the company and get it uploaded to an FTP site somewhere for you to pull it down and then upload it into your product. So when the users walk in every single morning, they log on, they see the latest data from other internal databases. Like that could be a very, very real situation in the software world. And so you can't rely on the company that you're dealing with to do all that work for you. That's a lot of work. There's time, it's resources, there's a lot of complexity around doing those things. So what that means is by getting your hands dirty, what I'm saying is that you're going to have to figure out all of these little hiccups that could take place that would prevent those success metrics from being attained. And if in the case that I just described, it's critical that the users of your product have access to data that's only available in some other internal database, well, then you sure as heck better get your hands dirty, get over to that database, figure out who the IT people are, get those people involved and help you get that data so that you can do the heavy lifting and make sure that if that means every single night you have to pull down an FTP site data and pull down data from an FTP site and push it into your platform for that customer, then you need to do it. If it means separately that you need to go on site and watch people use your product, you need to go personally sit. If you have 10 users in a pilot program as part of that pilot, if you need to personally sit with all 10 people one at a time for a half a day each and make sure they know every single way that they should be using your product to make sure that they're successful, then you need to go do that. It needs to be very hands-on because you can't just rely on the fact like, hey, I set up these 10 logins and I sent them to the 10 users, but they don't seem to be using my product. Well, part of that is because maybe they don't want to use it because it's considered an encumbrance to use some new product. Maybe part of it is they just got a little lost when they first tried to log in. Maybe they didn't realize, maybe they didn't get the email in the first place. Maybe for some reason that login email that you sent to them got put to their spam box, right? So by going and sitting with that person one-on-one, you're going to be making sure that every single person is logging in and using your software the right way. And even better, and this is to me the best part, is that you're going to be learning what that day-to-day is like with the users of your product. So you're going to get an enormous amount of learning from a customer development standpoint of all of the trials and all the tribulations and all the troubles that those people have, not just related to your product, but with their job. And that's going to give you a whole fresh perspective on how you should be building your product now that you have real users using it and you've got real user stories. So by doing that learning, and ultimately you're also going to be building some great relationships on the ground, you're going to have a whole army of people. These 10 people, if they're happy and successful using your product, then they're going to go tell the other 50 people perhaps that are working in that division, like, man, I'm using this brand new software product and our company is so awesome because they invested in us figuring out a way to solve this problem that we used to have to use spreadsheets and SharePoint and email to solve it. And now we have this great software that does it automatically and it lets me do my job so much better. Like imagine having that army of people that are going out and doing that ground campaign and that ground selling for you within the organization. So all of that comes from getting your hands dirty and making sure that those people are successful. And so when I say think consulting, that means you need to be on site. You need to be in front of these people. You have to make sure that they're successful. And so that if they're not successful, you need to figure out ways to adjust the product that they are, so that they are. Okay, so that's the fourth piece, the fourth part of setting up pilot programs. And the fifth is to make sure that you're setting short, fixed time horizons. So one of the challenges a lot of times with things like free trials is that you might put a timeline on a free trial and say, hey, for 2 weeks you can use my software package. Well, if it's a real enterprise software package, 2 weeks is probably not very much time for people to evaluate the software. And more importantly, people are probably not going to invest a ton of time to go and change their behavior for something that's only a 2-week free trial. And so in the case of the paid pilot, by expanding that pilot, by expanding the focus that people are going to have by using your product, then it allows you to make sure that they're going to be successful. And by charging them and exchanging the money that's involved, that purchase is really what's going to force that manager to make sure those users are using it. And so what you want to make sure that you're doing is that those fixed time horizons allow you to very quickly create those metrics that you want. And you don't want it to go on too long. You don't want it to turn into like, hey, we're going to use your software at a discount for 6 months, and then we'll decide whether or not we want to pay full amount. Like, because now you're in the situation where they're anchored to that low price. They've perceived this low price as a discount, as opposed to, hey, we're paying a little bit of money for access to a pilot program that runs for 6 weeks. And after 6 weeks, we're going to evaluate on these success metrics. And if we're successful, then we're going to expand more broadly, right? So it's a totally different scenario than allowing somebody to kind of continue using that product of yours for an undefined period of time. So by creating these short fixed time horizons of pilots, depending on the complexity of your product, maybe it can be as short as 4 to 6 weeks. Maybe it needs to be a little bit longer. For really large scale enterprise pilots that I've done pilots as long as 6 months, just because the complexity that it took to get people up and running and the amount of time that it took in order to prove that success. Now, we had very, very high level, top level buy-in from the executive teams. So we felt at that time, I felt at that time it would be okay to do a 6-month pilot because there was a lot of people way up the chain that were invested in making sure that this pilot was successful. If, however, you're dealing with smaller teams, more local teams, you want to avoid that situation where you're running too far down the road and everybody kind of loses enthusiasm and your customer gets anchored to what they think is a discounted price as opposed to what is the pilot program investment. So that's why you want to have short fixed time horizons, okay? So those are the 5 principles around setting up a pilot program. So if you're asking yourself like, okay, I get all these things, I know why it's important, I have a sense for why, how I need to be setting these up and what the principles are, what do I do? Like, how do I actually get my pilot programs up and running with people that I'm talking with? And so let me give you a couple of really specific strategies that you can deploy starting today to begin building these pilot programs with your sales opportunities you have in the pipeline and with folks that are coming in new each and every day. So the first thing you can do is ask for help. And what do I mean by ask for help? What you want to do is go to those sales opportunities you have in the bucket right now, people that you're dealing with. And if you have been selling your product as a larger solution, you've been trying to sell the whole thing as a startup, and you're trying to get people to buy into a large enterprise package, or trying to get hundreds of people, or a big license, or some kind of big consulting engagement if you're in a consulting or services type of firm. Instead of, what I want you to do is actually scale that back. So go to any of your sales opportunity, and maybe it's just the top 5 to start. Take your top 5 sales opportunities where you feel like, man, yes, this could be a huge sale for me, but I'm just not getting the progress that I need. Then here's what you want to do. You want to go back to who are your key contacts, or if you have a product champion identified at that target account, you want to go and ask that person for help and say to that product champion, say, look, we're making some great progress. I really appreciate over the last 3 or 4 months how we've gone from meeting online or meeting at a conference to the point where we've had some really great conversations across different people in your organization. In order for us to make sure that we're moving this thing forward, what I want to do is scale back the size of the initial engagement that we would be doing. So I know that in the sales presentations and in the conversations we've had with other executives across the organization, we've talked about rolling it out more broadly, or we've talked about a company license and a solution that would support hundreds of people. Here's what I want to do. I want you to help me figure out and plan what would be an ideal pilot project for just one small group within your company. So whether that's you personally, if you've got a small group of say 10 users where we could very quickly get up and running with a pilot program, or maybe you've got a good friend or a partner or somebody else organizationally that we can go to and say, hey, while we've been talking about these large implementations and this large sale, as excited as we are about this, what we want to do is prove success first before we go any further. So in a sense, you're kind of taking a step back to go too forward. Go and ask that person for help and just say, look, help me figure out what is the right way to set up a pilot program. How do we keep it small, right? How do we keep it from a budgetary standpoint under the budget ceiling, right? How do we create a timeline that works for everyone? What are the success metrics? Just help me understand what should a pilot program look like that we could roll out in a very short period of time, so that when we go back to those executives for another round of meetings, that we've got real data, real information, and real proof that my company, my product can solve your problems. So just go back and ask for help and treat it almost like water cooler or off the record or whatever it is. Like, diffuse the sales conversation and just turn it into a partnership conversation with that product champion or that key point of contact. So go back to your sales pipeline, find those top 5 opportunities that you think might be stalling or haven't gone anywhere or don't think they could be going anywhere, and go and ask your key contacts for help in what would a pilot program look like. And that way you can shape it and mold it so that it fits exactly to what you know will get you to a yes and get you in the door. So the second thing I want you to do is figure out a way to set a deadline. So whether that deadline is, say, by the end of Q1, I'm going to run 5 pilot programs, or however many you think you can support, following those other rules that we talked about in terms of establishing metrics and getting your hands dirty. Whatever you feel like you can reasonably support, like heavily support, you want to set a deadline for yourself. So maybe it's by the end of the month, by the end of the quarter, by June, whatever that deadline is, and then use that as an opportunity to kind of create some scarcity. So when you're talking with those top 5 or top 10 sales opportunities and you're asking for help and you're looking for an opportunity to create a pilot program, then you want to say to those people, look, we are going to support 5 pilot customers through the end of Q1. So listen, it's mid-January right now. You and I started talking back in Q3 of last year. I think it was in September that we met at a conference. We had a bunch of great conversations in Q4 of last year. Here we are in the new budget cycle, the new year. And to avoid us losing momentum, what I want to do is include you as one of the 5 customers that we're going to be supporting in this very high touch, high engagement pilot program. And so we're only allowing 5 customers because there's going to be high engagement, high support. I'm going to be spending time on site with all of your users. I'm going to have people from my team coming on site. You're going to get the best support ever, as well as we're going to be doing a lot of learning about the product. And so the only way that we can do that is to limit the number of people. And so we want to have this pilot program up and running, and we're going to be supporting people up to 5 people through the end of Q1. So what this does is just allows you to create a little bit of scarcity, and allows you to also just mentally yourself, it allows you to focus in on how you're going to get these pilot programs up and running with the existing pipeline that you have or any new leads coming in. Okay, so that's the second thing you can do, is think about what is a reasonable deadline and a reasonable capacity that you have for making sure that these pilot customers that you're going to be pushing towards are going to be super duper successful. Okay, and then the third thing I want you to do is include pilots as part of your sales process. So for any new leads coming in, for any new sales opportunities, for any new inbound or any new conversations that you're having, as you were talking with people and they say, well, how do you work? Like, hey, product sounds really cool. Sounds like you could solve our problems. I mean, we'd have to do a much larger sale, or we'd have to have more conversations with different people within an organization. But tell me now, here it is, conversation 1, conversation 2, in us engaging with you. Like, tell me how it works. How do you work with customers? Then what I want you to do is include pilots as a fixed part of your sales process. And so when that person says, hey, this looks really cool, thanks for the early demo, how does this work, what will we do next? Then what I want you to say is, thanks so much, I'm really glad that you're excited about this. Here's the next step for us. The next step that we take with all of our customers is setting up a pilot program that will allow us to establish metrics, prove success, build trust, do all those things that are going to be critically important. And so as the next step, I want you to help me figure out what that pilot would look like for your company. Who would be the user base? Who are the 5 or 10 users that we would be targeting as the best case to test whether or not our product can solve your problem? Who would be the managers involved? Who would be, for example, an IT support person that we might be able to rely on in case I need access to your database or we need to exchange data files or any of those things? And who would be responsible for the budget, for the payment of a pilot program? And so is that your budget? Is that a different manager's budget, whoever that is? So by introducing pilots as a necessary part of your sales process, you're able to take leadership with those new leads that are coming in, with those new potential customers, and giving them something really specific to latch onto so that they know, like, oh, got it, this is a really great idea. So before you're trying to sell us thousands of licenses, here's somebody who's reasonable and realistic about what should happen next, which is getting a pilot up and running. And so if it's the right decision maker, they're going to be appreciative that you're taking this approach and that you're taking leadership and that you're willing to put yourself out there within a pilot program to test and establish these metrics to make sure that, in fact, you can come through for them to solve the problems that you say you can solve. So that's one benefit. The other benefit is if that person says, oh gosh, like I don't even know where to start, or I don't know how we do these things, or I don't know who would be paying for this, or I don't know who those users are, then chances are maybe you've vetted out now somebody who might not be the right person for you at that target organization. And so it allows you to start elbowing around a little bit and say, oh, okay, well, gosh, if we're going to get this pilot program up and running, if we don't know who would be paying for this, or we don't know who those people are, those users as part of a pilot program, like who could we go ask? Who should we talk to next within your company to go find the answers to these questions? Because it's really important for us, and it's almost a required step for us to sell our product, that we go through this pilot program phase. So help me figure out who within your organization we should be talking to next to get the answers to these questions, right? So instead of making that person feel like that you're going to try to like bull rush them or go over them or around them, instead you're looking for an opportunity to engage that person, because if they're excited about your product, you want to use that excitement as a way to get access to other people in the organization that you're going to need eventually if you're going to be selling a much larger program or a much larger license to them down the road. Okay, so that's the third thing I want you to do, is include pilots now as a required step in your sales process, because it's going to help you move much more swiftly. It's going to reduce the risk, and it's going to help that customer appreciate that you are taking leadership in the sales process and taking a very mature approach to selling your product, to selling your company to them, when they are going to be viewing you as a risky endeavor in the first place. Okay, so those are the three things that you can do right away. So that's my presentation on setting up pilot programs. There's lots of questions that you might have, and so if you have questions, as always, I want you to send me an email, put something on the Facebook group, give me a call. We can set up a one-on-one to go through how we might think about your product or your service, your consulting team, whatever it is that you want to set up a pilot program around. We can sit down and figure that out for a target customer or two. And let's figure out what the message needs to be. Let's figure out what the extensiveness of the pilot program needs to be. What are the right features? What are the problems that feature is going to solve? Whatever it is, whatever support you need in order to make sure that you're moving in the right direction to setting up these pilot programs, I'm here for you. So let's do that. That's the presentation of pilot programs. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, give me a shout. I'm here to help. Scott Sambucci, signing off.